Roccia is a character many people have become excited for thanks to the fact that she is able to buff a very beloved character, being Camellia. But how good is she actually? I read through her kit and I did the numbers, and I've come to a conclusion you might actually not agree with. So it might be worth it to stick around, but first I'm gonna have to explain Roccia's abilities to those who are uninitiated, starting with her basic attack. Her basic attack is just a string of damage. However, what is good to know is that it will charge her Forte bar. If you decide to do a heavy attack, you can charge it up to also obtain more of her Forte bar. And once it is released and you have at least one segment of the Forte bar, you are able to use your Forte attack. But more about that once we actually get into the Forte circuit. Her resonance skill will create a tornado that sucks in enemies, as well as put Roccia in her Forte state. You're most likely going to use this when Roccia actually has enough Forte to do her full combo. Speaking of the full combo, now we are going to go on to her Forte circuit. If you can't already tell, Roccia is a lot easier to understand than Carlotta, thank God. Roccia's Forte will have her charge Imagination through her Intra skill, basic attacks, heavy attack, and her resonance skill. It stacks up to 300 times, and for every 100 point of Forte, you can cast one consecutive attack. This attack will be carried out once she is in the state of Flying Fantasy. You can trigger this through her heavy attack or her resonance skill. When she is in this state, she is able to consume 100 Forte at a time to do an attack that counts as resonance skill damage. When she does the third attack in the string, aka using all of her imagination 3 times in a row, you will be able to buff the entire team's attack based on Roccia's crit rate. This maxes out at 200 attack if you're at 70% crit rate or higher. I was really afraid that Roccia wasn't going to be better than Sanhua, and thus I said that she needed to have some buffing in her kit. And while this does classify as buffing within her kit, it's very low and disappointing, but we'll get more into that in a second. Roccia's Resonance Liberation will just be a hit of damage. It really is just a hit of damage. There's no specific elaboration here. It doesn't even regenerate any of her Forte. It is exclusively used as a way to regenerate more Concerto energy. And then for her Intra and Outra skill. Her Intra skill is just going to deal damage, and it will be restoring part of her Forte gauge. But when we start to look at her Outra skill, we can see why the Camellia fans are so happy with this character. The next character's Havoc damage bonus will be amplified by 20%, and their basic attack damage bonus will be amplified by 25%. This is the theoretical perfect Outra skill buff for Camellia. And because of the Havoc damage restriction and the fact that Sanhua is so good, Camellia is the only team that Roccia is going to be actually good for. Now it's time to get into the inherent skills. The first one will make it so whenever you cast your Resonance skill or your heavy attack, Roccia will be able to increase her attack by 20% for 12 seconds. Because you use the heavy attack or skill a bit later into the rotation, it's not going to have that good of an effect. Her second inherent skill will make it so whenever your Outra skill is cast, the next character's exploration tool will be replaced by an item called the Rare Chest. What it's able to do is it will be able to suck enemies in continuously for 14 seconds, which should be the maximum duration that your character should be on field for because of Roccia's Outra skill duration. I think this would have been an amazing effect to have on literally any kind of character, as long as their Outra skill was a bit more universal. The issue with Roccia is that her kit is so specific that you're only going to be using her with Camellia, and Camellia has plenty of AoE, so she doesn't exactly need this grouping either. Before I dive deeper into the Roccia and Camellia synergy, I would like to talk about the new Havoc set coming in the 2.0 patch that Roccia is most likely going to be using. Its 2-piece will increase Havoc damage by 10%, pretty standard. The 5-piece will make it so whenever a character triggers an Outra skill, it will deal an additional hit of damage equal to 480% of the character's attack. It will also increase the Havoc damage bonus of the next character by 15% for 15 seconds. This is very obviously made for Roccia, and also very specifically made to support Camellia. But I don't think the Roccia Camellia synergy is going to be as good as most people. This comes down to a couple of factors. First of all, Roccia's field time, and her need for her intro skill. Currently, one of Camellia's strongest rotation features her doing 2 intro skills. The first one will be after Shorekeeper and has her gather up Concerto energy, and then the second one will be after Sanhua, in which she will be able to instantly enter her budding mode because she already collected enough Concerto energy to do so, which means that every single attack in her budding state will be buffed by Sanhua, which is something she regularly cannot accomplish unless you play literally perfectly. However, because Roccia really needs her intro skill for her own Forte bar, this makes it so Camellia cannot do the same thing as she could with Sanhua. Roccia's field time, even with her intro skill, is also far longer than that of Sanhua, who is famous for having one of the shortest field times of any sub-DPS in the entire game. This makes it so, ultimately, Roccia is not going to be that good of a support for Camellia because Sanhua is already broken. So is there really any value in pulling for Roccia when Sanhua was literally given for free? She even buffs more thanks to her S6 giving a 20% attack buff, which is going to essentially be the same thing as Roccia's 200 attack buff from her Forte circuit. Roccia's additional utility in the form of grouping also isn't super relevant to Camellia, because Camellia already has incredible AoE in the first place. Why would you want to give grouping to a character who already has insane levels of AoE damage? It just doesn't make sense. She can easily clear any area of Tower of Adversity, even the AoE stages, because her area of effect is just that large. Anyway, that was a bit of a rant. Now it's time for me to do what I always do and talk about the character's signature weapon, and then their sequences. Roccia's signature weapon is a gauntlet with 587 base attack and 24.3% crit rate, just like the Verity's handle. Its passive will increase attack by 12%, and when casting basic attack or intro skills, the damage bonus of resonant skills will be increased by 48%, which lasts for 3 seconds. This means that because Roccia's damage is mostly skill damage, it's going to be pretty good for her. It's also going to be a good gauntlet for Ling Yang, because currently his best in slot is Shang Liao's, which doesn't really tailor towards Ling Yang's playstyle. However, because this buffs resonant skills, which Ling Yang does do, it's actually pretty good on him. But you're probably not going to be pulling these for your Ling Yang. But it's time for me to talk about the sequences next. Once you get these, Roccia will start actually outperforming Sanhua. Her S1 will make it so her resonant skill will give an additional 100 imagination, and will also give 10 Concerto energy. This is a really strong buff towards Roccia, as it essentially makes her rotation way shorter, because you can just do your intro, immediately use her ult, and then her E, and then her Forte, and that'll be the entire rotation. Incredibly strong sequence. Her sequence 2 will make it so whenever you cast your Forte basic attack, the entire team gets 10% havoc damage bonus for up to 3 stacks. And after using an outro skill, it will be an additional 10%, which means you get a total 40% havoc damage bonus. Once again, an insane sequence. The S3 will make it so whenever you use your intro skill, Roccia's crit rate will be increased by 10% and her crit damage increased by 30%. It focuses more on her personal damage, but I am not really a big fan of this. Sequence 4 will make it so whenever you cast your resonant skill, the damage multiplier of her Forte circuit is increased by 60%. This is actually really good for Roccia's personal damage and way better than the S3 if you ask me. S5 will make it so whenever you use your Resonance Liberation, the damage multiplier is increased by 20% and its crit damage by 80%. Once again, it's focusing more on Roccia's personal damage, but it's a pretty decent increase. However, for her S6, when she casts her Resonance Liberation, at the beginning, there will be extra effects that are obtained. For 12 seconds, when the Forte attack is used, it ignores 60% of the opponent's defense. You can also keep spamming the Forte attacks after you've used the third attack at the cost of no imagination, and it will always do the same damage as the third attack of the Forte circuit. This essentially turns Roccia into more of a DPS character, which is something that Genshin has been doing with their sub-DPS characters for a long time. And this is the first time that Wuthering Waves shares the sentiment, which I think is a good thing. If you're going to S6 a character, it's most likely because you really like that character. So being able to play them as a DPS even when they aren't intended to is very nice, and I'm glad the crew is finally doing this. I am, however, still disappointed by Roccia's performance at S0, and I don't recommend her for anyone unless you are a really big Camellia fan who also uses someone like Encore who also likes using Sanhua. Ultimately, Roccia's value comes by freeing up your Sanhua, because she is a very strong character. However, if you do not have multiple Sanhua users, pulling for Roccia is kind of useless, and I do not recommend it to anyone. But that's just my opinion. If you disagree with me, be sure to let me know in the comments. If you want to get into a discussion, a better place to reach me would be my Discord or my Twitter, both of which are linked in the description. If you found this video informative, be sure to subscribe and like the video. But that'll be all from me. Peace!